Excellent. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Wild Napa. We are really excited to be here with y'all tonight. This is our second Wild Napa of the year. We are doing them every other month at this point. And hopefully, once we are able to gather again, we are hoping to actually offer some field-based Wild Napa programs. So stay tuned for that, and maybe we can all go on a walk, socially distanced together, which would be really exciting. So let's go over our typical spiel for those of you on Zoom and Facebook Live, just some etiquette about asking questions and things like that. I've gone ahead and muted all of you. Your videos can stay on if you want them to. Feel free to turn them off. It's totally up to you. If you have a question at any point throughout the program, this goes for both Facebook Live and for Zoom. On Zoom, if you hover over your screen, over the bottom of your screen, a little black bar should show up. And you should have a little chat bubble icon. And if you click on that, a white column or box will pop up on your screen. For me, it's on the right-hand side of my screen. And you can chat, you can type in any questions that you may have throughout the entire program. You aren't going to be interrupting anybody or anything like that. I will be monitoring all of the questions, both from Zoom and Facebook Live. And I'll compile all of them, make sure there aren't any repeats, and we will try and get as many as possible answered by the end of the evening. For those of you who are on Facebook Live, hello, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comment section underneath the live video in Facebook. I'm also going to be monitoring them. And again, we'll compile and make sure all of those get answered hopefully get all of those answered by the end of the evening. If you get kicked off of the Zoom especially, you can always join by going to facebook.com/NapaRCD. You don't have to be a Facebook member. It will just automatically bring it up and you can watch it. Or you can try and log back on. We are recording this. Presentation, so it will be available on our Facebook Live immediately. And then it will also be on our YouTube page, probably mid next week or maybe the week after that. So if you are really excited about it, you're really jazzed up and you want to share it and send it to other people that you know who might be interested, you can feel free to do that when we have that sharing available. And now I'll kind of hop right into it. My name is Ashley. I am the Community Engagement Project Manager here at Napa County Resource Conservation District. We're a non-regulatory agency here in Napa County. We work within the boundaries of Napa County. We do a whole bunch of different things, from youth education to volunteer work to vineyard technical assistance, all sorts of things, but it all boils down to helping all of you care for the land, water, soil, and wildlife here in Napa County. So one thing that I am personally very excited about is to let y'all know that volunteer events are back at Napa RCD. It's a huge chunk of my job. It's my favorite part of my job, and I'm really excited to let y'all know that we will be planning a large citywide Earth Day cleanup on April 24th as part of Earth Day Napa. So keep your eyes and ears open for that, and we'll get some communication out about the different sites that will be around the city as soon as we possibly can. And then we have two other things that are happening pretty quickly. Tomorrow morning is the first day of our Soil Health Symposium. We will be, it's gonna be a 2-day symposium all about soil health, talking about climate change, what you can do as best practices to keep your soil health up and to make your soil health better. And that's going to be for 2 days. And then on March 19th, so next Friday, we'll be running, in partnership with Napa Green, we'll be running a conservation burn workshop. So we did a conservation burn. We've compiled a big video of 2 different styles of burn, a kiln burn and a pile burn. And we'll sort of be walking you through the steps of doing those conservation burns, which are now a requirement for Napa Green certification here in Napa County. And you can find more information on both of those events at naparcd.org. And I'll throw that website into the chat real soon. If you are not on our email list, feel free to send me an email or send me a chat. I'll put my email in the chat boxes, and feel free to just chat me if you want to be added to our newsletter list, to our volunteer list, and I can make sure that that happens for you. And I can't go any further without acknowledging our sponsors. Our Wild series is only made possible through the support of the Watershed Information and Conservation Council, Friends of the Napa River, the Carolyn Parr Nature Center, Napa Valley Vintners, and the American Canyon Community and Parks Foundation. So we couldn't do these programs without their support. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now, since none of you are here to listen to me talk about all of the things, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to tonight's speakers, Jenn Hyman and Erica Ahmann Smithies. Many people have been following the stories of dam removal and fish barrier removal throughout California and throughout the country. And it's a topic that people are really excited to hear about. So we're really, really, really thrilled to have all of you here to talk about a really recent removal here in Napa County. So I will go ahead and turn it over to, I believe Jenn is going to be sharing her screen, and you go ahead and take it away.
All right, here I go. I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint slides.
You are good.
All right. I'm really excited. Erica, Ahmann Smithies, and I are really excited to share our project that we've worked long and hard on the last several years, and finally was completed at the end of last year, all through various pandemics, wildfires, etc., regional state crises. But we got it done and have some great information and photos to share with you today. Erica, why don't you take it from here? Well, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Jenn Hyman. I'm the Director of Engineering with a consulting firm called EKI, Environment and Water. We're primarily a Bay Area consulting firm, and I'm a practicing civil engineer. I've been in the business working on different types of water projects for the last 28 years. Erica, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? You're muted? Oh, Ashley, can you unmute Erica?
Thank you. I tried to notify you that before I started, but hi, I'm Erica Ahmann Smithies. Helena Public Works Director for a couple of more days before I go to the City of American Canyon. I'm a civil engineer, licensed civil engineer. I've been working over 23 years on public works projects, and glad to finally see this project through for the City of St. Helena before I go.
This is what we're going to talk about today. In our presentation, we'll tell you a little bit about the project setting, the need for the project, the restoration design. That was the key part of implementing the project. Photos of the construction, which had numerous challenges, and a little bit about the glass fire impacts on the project. Right when the project was complete, the glass fire swept through the whole project area and changed things. This is a photo of what the York Creek Reservoir looked like several decades ago. It was probably pretty fun for swimming at one time. Eric, you want to talk a little bit about the history of the dam?
Oh, I guess I try to keep it muted because I have 2 young children at home. So as you're aware, I don't want to read the slides word for word, but the dam was constructed in around 1900 and was eventually part of the city's original water supply infrastructure. The dam itself is 140 feet wide and 50 feet tall. And over the years, sediment accumulated behind the dam, rendering the reservoir unusable without frequent dredging. It also got the city in trouble. I'm not sure if that's in your slide later, Jen, but you know, it would just consistently would silt in. It would take a lot of maintenance to keep the capacity steady behind the dam. Do you want me to elaborate more on that, Jen, or do you have more slides coming up on that?
No, that's about it. And I think the other thing to point out from this map here is that you can see that York Creek travels through a hilly, forested, undeveloped area until it gets down to the town of St. Helena that's developed and pretty flat. And there's a section of the very end of the creek here that was straightened out probably about 80 years ago by the original wineries in town before it gets to the Napa River.
And it's very flat as you get out to the river.
The creek is in a watershed, a very small watershed that's part of the Napa River watershed. And this map shows the little purple area of the York Creek watershed. And that's all the water that drains into the creek. And it eventually feeds into the Napa River, and this big shaded area is the Napa River. What also is shown on this particular map that I want to thank Water Audit for letting me use, the areas marked in orange are areas right now in the Napa River watershed that are also blocked by fish passage barriers and primarily dams. And the Napa River is home to the Central California coast steelhead, which is a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act, it's a type of rainbow trout. And the Napa County RCD has a program to monitor steelhead throughout the Napa River watershed. So they're the one of the many agencies that are tracking the population of steelhead and helping it to recover in the watershed. A little bit about steelhead. So real cute little fish. This is an actual picture of the steelhead that our biologists found when they were surveying for steelhead at the base of the dam right before construction. Part of the project I'll talk about later, they had to take all the fish out of this one area of the creek before construction can start. And in that process, they found 100 little baby steelhead right at the base of the dam, waiting to migrate up over the dam. So they also found steelhead, which are called rainbow trout, when they're not able to migrate to the ocean, when they're just landlocked. There were many, numerous rainbow trout upstream of the dam as well. Steelhead are very charismatic fish. They start their life in fresh water, go out to the ocean in salt water, and then come back up where they were born to lay their eggs and spawn in the gravels. They prefer smaller, high gradient little streams, just like York Creek is really valuable steelhead habitat. And they lay their eggs in gravel. So it's really important in a healthy stream for steelhead to have gravel bars where the steelhead can lay their eggs in what we call a red. And that's how the biologists are going to be tracking the recovery of steelhead in York Creek, is by counting the reds, because it is pretty tricky to actually see steelhead. They hide under the rocks. They're pretty elusive. The lower picture are some pictures of mature steelhead that are also in the area. They're in the Sulphur Creek watershed, which is pretty close by. Here's a picture of the York Creek watershed with a little more detail in it. The city's dam is right about where this red spot is. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. And it blocked about 1.5 miles of upstream steelhead habitat. And so it was known to all the resource agencies that this project was a high priority for them because of the value of the habitat upstream that would be opened up to the steelhead once the dam was removed. The upstream areas have a slope of about 4%, which is relatively steep. And whereas the lower areas down in the lower reaches of the creek in St. Helena are very level, closer to 1% slope. So it's important when you're doing a creek restoration project to, you don't just look at the section of the creek you're restoring, you actually have to really look at the entire creek. as a system. And Lower York Creek has many bridges along it. We ended up counting them all and mapping them all to make sure that once we removed the dam, which was going to really change how the creek was behaving, that we could monitor all the downstream choke points along the creek to make sure that debris that now is free to go down the creek wouldn't get hung up on the bridges. So we actually made this map. I know it's probably impossible for you to read, but it shows the bridges, who owns them, all along the creek, and the different property ownership that we had to contact people to get permission to examine the creek near these bridges. Here's some pictures of some of the bridges downstream of the dam. They date back to when the dam itself was built, some of them, because St. Helena has a long storied history of development. So we wanted to make sure that these bridges were not going to be impacted after the dam was taken out. It's pretty hard to actually take a picture of the dam. This top picture is what the dam looked like right before the project started. It is an earthen dam. It was, as Erica mentioned, it was totally filled up behind it with sediment, and had a forest was growing on top of the sediment, and on the face of the dam were even like redwood trees that are 2 feet in diameter. So it was really hard. It just looked, if you drove by this on Spring Mountain Road, it would pretty much just look like a forest to you. The one feature that is very prominent is this concrete spillway, where even after the dam filled up with sediment, in the winter, the water would, if it filled up, if the water got high behind the dam, it would spill over and get carried over safely over the top of the dam in this concrete lined spillway. And there's a little bridge here over it to get to the top of the dam. That is like one of the only things left on the project. And this lower photo shows what the sediment looked like. As I mentioned, it basically had a forest of alders and willows growing over it, but also a lot of invasive species like blackberries and English ivy that were required to be removed in the project. So the goal of the project started when there was an accidental release of sediment from the drain of the dam in 1992, and the city was ordered to remove the dam by wildlife agencies. Also, because all this sediment was backed up behind the dam, the downstream area of the creek downstream of the dam had been degraded because it didn't have this great natural sediment in it that is a normal part of any healthy creek. And is also needed for the habitat for the steelhead. So the goal of the project was to remove the dam in the sediment area behind the dam, restore the creek, restore the natural sediment transport processes in the creek, and then allow the creek in this area to revegetate naturally with native species. I think this would be a good place for Erica to talk a little bit about the project history. I've only been on the project for the last couple of years, but the project did start basically after the 1992 accidental release, when a number of scientific studies were done.
Yeah, there was a lot of studies. There's a lot of electronic files that go back to 93, back and forth between agencies, Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Wildlife, NOAA Fisheries, the Water Board, just talking about, the best step forward with the removal of the dam. It wasn't until about 2006 that the city started moving forward with drafting the EIR. and actually moving forward with an initial sediment removal at the dam. They actually had a groundbreaking, I believe, in 2017 to remove 12,000 yards of soil or sediment that had been raised again behind the dam. However, there was funding issues at the same time. If you know the history of St. Helena, they were also imparting on their flood control project. So I believe their focus went there and funding went there until the city was able to receive both an EPA and a state Prop 84 grant totaling 2.8 million or thereabouts. I like to give a shout out to Erica Lensky. She's been the EPA representative and she's on the call this evening, and also Natasha and James Mueller from the state that have really helped this project move forward beginning in 2017. So we received the grants, I think earlier than the 14-15, it was about 2012, but after the recession had hit, so the grants weren't being initiated too quickly. So it wasn't until 14-15 that the EIR moved forward. And then an RFP for design went out in 2015, a consultant selected in 2016. I was brought to this project in February of 2017. And right then, San Clemente Dam 17 was a record rainfall year, and the state wanted to take a less aggressive approach with the dam removal. So flash forward to now, 2019, we had a transition to a new consultant, and thankfully to our city attorney at the time, we brought Jenn Hyman on board with EKI, and she brought with her subconsultants WRA to really get this project moving and permitted in design. So there was years of design and permitting studies, and then it wasn't until 2019 that we got a consultant that could take it to the finish line and get permits resubmitted to the regulatory agencies. And not 2009, fall 2019, and as well as do a pre-qualification for contracts and solicit bids from January to April. We awarded construction on June 23rd of 2020. In the middle of pandemic, we had our first virtual online bid opening and went quite successfully. And we began work on Monday, June 29th with our first biological resources training, environmental training, a lot of training with this project because of the sensitive species up at the dam site. And construction was basically finished by September 26th, I want to say. I don't know if Jenn wants to chime in on that date. 3 days before the glass fire broke out. And they had to come back and do some repair work, but they finished up in November. But amidst that, I mean, June 23rd, we didn't have the Army Corps permit in hand or the California Fish and Wildlife permit in hand. So we had to limp along with some work until we could have the final permit. And we didn't get the final permit from the Army Corps until August 3rd. But the contractor was able to make a lot of headway there. And now we're in the first year of post-construction monitoring. My Napa County RCD's Paul Blank. They've also teamed with the WRA biologists. So we have some wonderful synergy there when we have the biologists that help get this project to construction to also be on this project post-construction monitoring.
You work on the permit and design for years and years, and then it takes like 4 months to get it done.
Yeah, I forgot that part. It was almost the same cost of all the design, the transport modeling. For those who don't know, the project before 2017, the project was taking a very regimented regulatory approach. We're going to do everything by the book. Well, the San Clemente Dam did do all that work, and it washed out. Mother Nature took over with all the rains we had in 2017, and everyone liked how it turned out. So the approach here was, let's do less aggressive. Let's see what Mother Nature's going to do. We know, sediment, there's good sediment up there that will transport out. So let's see what will happen and how this will play out. No one would have thought we would have been going to a serious drought year, or it looks like it, but in some ways that might be a silver lining with this project.
I'll start talking about the design, the restoration design. So this is a plan by WRA Environmental Consultants, who is a team member with EKI on the design. There were two key design elements to the project. The first was to remove the dam. and also excavate a new creek channel in the sediments behind the dam. The other big design element were artificially constructed log structures placed into the creek at 36 locations downstream of the dam. And the purpose of these log structures was to sort of kickstart the restoration of the sediment deposition in the stretch of creek that had been starved of sediment for a century. So we put into the design that the contractor had to find some redwood or Doug fir trees, bring them to the creek and lay them down in a very deliberate design to capture sediment. And some of the sediment from behind the dam was left in place to replenish the downstream areas below the dam. I have bulleted here a whole bunch of different challenges that we had in the design. Endangered species that were out there, the northern spotted owl and California red-legged frog. They weren't out there, but because it was potential habitat for them, we had to treat it as if they could have been there. And that created a very narrow work window for construction. We were only allowed to be out there from July to October, which gave me heart palpitations over being able to haul all this dirt and meet that deadline. A large amount of dirt, and thankfully COVID reduced all the traffic in town, and we were able to do a lot more hauling than we expected, and the contractor finished early in the end. So that was great. There's natural occurring asbestos in the project because it's present naturally in the bedrock at concentrations of up to 3%. We had to get a special permit and do air monitoring because of that. Spring Mountain Road is right up against the creek in the project area, so we had to take the stability of the road into account. There are numerous historic Native American artifacts in the project area, so we had a professional archaeologist prepare different permits and reports and surveys before and during construction. And access to the creek was very difficult because of some of the steep creek banks that were out there. That's just some of the challenges we faced in the design. So the sediment removal, this picture may be hard to see, but basically in our design, our plans showed where the contractor needed to remove dirt to create a new topographic surface. And basically the dam's pretty much gone, and there's basically a straight notch through the sediment, leaving some of the sediment behind on the edges of this sort of pilot channel. And with time, Mother Nature's storms will come through here and create a sinuous natural creek channel through this area with time. A little bit of riprap or boulders were placed right along the steepest edge of the excavation to help support that slope where it's closest to the road. And again, here's some more plans that we developed for the contractor to read to understand exactly how to excavate the notch. In a side view profile, here's what the dam looks like. You can see the sediment, the line that represents the top of the sediment here. And we had a very big element of the design is having an accurate topographic survey. We surveyed the creek bed elevation upstream of the sediment and downstream of the dam, and basically drew a straight line between them so that we could recreate the original natural slope of the creek in this area. So the contractor did not excavate down below that new slope, that 4% slope that's found in the creek in this area. Our original studies did show, though, that in building the dam, they had excavated deeper into the creek bed to create material to build the dam with. So it was important to know where the bedrock was out there so we wouldn't hit it because of the asbestos in it. The permits, environmental permits, require a very deliberate process for taking the trees down. A very detailed tree survey was done by WRA. They actually had to go out and measure and identify every tree in the project area over 6 inches in diameter. They gave the tree a number and put a little tag on it. And each tree had a special disposition that the contractor had to do with it. Some of the trees were saved to be used for log structures. Some were saved, had their branches saved for what's called slash that was utilized in the project as a restoration element. And non-native species were removed. So here, this you can't read, but this is our tree plan here for the contractor that was in the plans. These are some pictures of the vegetation removal. It was a very laborious 3-step process where first the trees were cut down to grade. Then shrubs were cut down to an 8-inch height. And this is all to make sure that no species who might be in the wet areas of the creek were not impacted by the construction equipment. And then under the oversight of a biological monitor, this thing on the right here that's called a masticator ground up everything so that what was left was just sand and no vegetation whatsoever. A creek bypass had to be put in to divert the water in the creek around the entire excavation area so that the soil dried out. Otherwise, it would have been just a mushy mess and impossible to excavate. This is a photo of WRA's fisheries biologists putting in fish screens to trap all the fish and relocate them prior to putting in the creek bypass. And the photo on the right shows the sheet piles that the contractor drove upstream of the dam to create the cofferdam for diverting the water. Here's a picture on the left here of the bypass pumps and the bypass piping that went down the spillway to redirect the water. The hauling, that was the real meat of the project. Our contractor did an incredible job, McCullough Construction. They really solved problems quickly when they ran into obstacles, and all throughout the excavation, they had Spring Mountain Road down to 1 lane, which really was tough on the vineyards on that road, but they managed to endure it. And also as I mentioned, the air quality all around the construction site was monitored at 3 locations for asbestos throughout the project. 1,933 truckloads were hauled off site over a 6-week period. Here's some more pictures of the construction and the excavation. And this is before looking at the face of the dam. It was basically a jumble of redwoods and Doug firs, and with the creek water at the bottom. And now this is what it looked like at the end of the project with the creek channel going through it. This is the first of the artificial log structures right here. And here's the riprap on the right-hand side on the steep bank holding up the road. WRA did an amazing job really looking at every tree and saving what they could. These redwoods right near the notch of the dam probably would have been taken out, but they made sure that the design very carefully had an excavation around this cluster of redwood trees to save it. And again, the same thing with some trees on the right. It's really carefully designed. These are some drawings of the log structures. I'm actually going to speed up a little bit because it's already 7:37. The log structures were bolted up to trees, and really these logs are super heavy. Some of the logs in the design had to have root wads on it. These were the particularly heavy trees, had to be carried down by giant excavators with special rubber tracks to minimize impact on the vegetation along the creek. Then the glass fire came after the log structures were all installed. You're just about to sign off on the project, and all of our log structures burned. This is what the first log structure right at the base of the dam looked like before the fire, and afterwards. I don't know if everyone on this call has been up there, but it basically turned into a moonscape. There's no vegetation at all, and just rocks. So it was just terrifying while it was happening. Most of the log structures, it turned out, were structurally sound. Because most of them were actually from freshly cut trees that had been cut just for the project. There were a couple places where some existing dead trees had been used, and those did burn and needed to be replaced and re-anchored. So there were 6 log structures that were really burnt that needed repairs. But what if we were worried before the fire about the sediment left in our project to be washed downstream, this worry was dwarfed by the post-fire conditions, with the worry of all the ash and all the other fire debris that is potentially going to wash down the creek this winter. So our monitoring plan became a lot more important after the fire. Here's some more fire pictures of some of the log structures. You can see here's one of the bolts that goes through a live tree to anchor the tree. And also some of the trees that were placed, they're still pretty good shape. But again, there's no brush or anything left. Here are some pictures taken in January of the project area. So here's the creek channel through the sediments, and there's pretty decent flow starting to erode the sediment that was left behind. So we're pretty excited that it's starting to start the natural evolution process of turning into a creek. It's got little meanders. Here's a tree that fell from the fire that's adding some complexity and kind of creating a little gravel bar behind it, which is exactly what we were hoping to have happen. These straw wattles are part of the erosion control that was left after the construction. And they're actually, post-fire, a lot of branches and trees are falling down, which are just going to actually help with the creek restoration. You can see already behind, this is the first log structure, and look at all that sediment that's already backed up behind this one log structure. So we're really hoping for some high flows. Actually, I'm really curious what happened last night with the big rain that we just had. But we're really hoping for rain to really start the restoration process for our project. These are photos just taken a couple days ago by Erica of the project. It's the revegetation Again, we're hoping the plan is for it to naturally revegetate, but all in the area where the sediment was, there are some willow stakes in there. Buckeye and oak seeds were planted all throughout this area, and then it was also just hydroseeded with native grasses for erosion control in the meantime. But part of the long-term monitoring is also to monitoring the revegetation. If it doesn't happen adequately in the next 5 years or so, the city's committed to coming out and actually planting some trees out there. But we want to, it's a long-term monitoring plan to hopefully allow the creek to naturally restore and revegetate. A little bit about the 10-year monitoring plan. So this was mandated by the agencies in the project permits. There's going to be monitoring for the steelhead recovery. They're going to track the invasive species removal and the riparian vegetation restoration, look for problematic erosion and debris accumulation at the bridges and other areas in the lower reaches of the creek. And Napa County RCD and the City of St. Helena staff have teamed up to carry out this long-term monitoring plan. There's really a sort of a scientific basis behind the different types of monitoring that are going to happen in different stretches of the creek. And that's what's shown in this figure in this table here. That's the end of the talk. I think Erica will share our acknowledgements.
It literally took a team to get this project done in a short amount of time. What we didn't share before is we were up against the grant deadline for the Prop 84 grant, as well as the EPA. The EPA had a little more flexibility in extending the grant, but the Prop 84 had some hard stop deadlines. So I want to thank Erica Ulensky with the US EPA. She's been a fantastic representative. We had several representatives with the Prop 84 grant, but most at the end was Natasha and James Fuller, Brian Partel, WRA project manager, really go-getter. He wanted to go in there even though it was still steaming with fire or smoking, but you know, you just got to be careful out there. McCullough Construction, that masticator that Jenn shared earlier, also saved some of the city's facilities. In the LNU fire, we thought that our water treatment plant was going to be hit hard. So we got up, McCullough did an emergency fire contract and did some clearing, and it saved the water treatment plant with the glass fire. If we had not done the defensible space around that plant, we've been in tough shape. The McCullough construction contract, they are fantastic to work with. They're also a registered DBE, as they're, I believe, a Native American owned company. The St. Helena City Council, they've been steadfast about getting this project done for years. We finally had the financing. They've funded general funds. I mean, it's unheard of to put towards the enterprise fund, general fund money. But this project's been going on for so long, they put $1.6 million over 2 years of general funds toward this. And then our regional, state, and federal elected representatives, they were fantastic. They helped our regulatory agency reps stay focused and prioritize this project. Our Congressman Thompson's office especially helped us at the finish line with the State Historic Preservation Office, with their friendship relationships there, and getting the historic portion of this project approved. I don't know if anyone knows, but that was our last holdup with our Army Corps permit. Was this is a historic site, and we had to go through all the steps. Once we had all the regulatory, the important fishery and wetland initiatives out of the way, it was down to historic preservation, and of course Napa County RCD. And just have to thank everyone, the regulatory agency representatives. I do want to give a shout out to Agnes Bars with the Water Board. She helped really organize the different agencies. Before this project, had been in many Caltrans highway meetings as an interchange liaison in Petaluma. And there was over 20 people at these one-on-one meetings that were being held monthly prior to COVID. And it's a lot of people in the room that had all their different needs to be met for their permits. And everyone came together for this project. And it's wonderful to see this through. And Jenn Hyman, she really bulldogged this. Can't thank Jenn enough. She was transitioning, helping to project manage the prior consultant. And then when that wasn't working out, we asked EKI to take on this project. And she said yes, and so did WRA. So thank you. The city thanks you. I thank you.
Thank you. It was a really fun project. Thanks, Erica. I have a video, a drone video of the post-fire project. I don't know if everyone's got the bandwidth for this to be viewed, but while it's showing, slideshow, and this is from WRA again. Please feel free to put questions in the chat.
So while that's playing, I have a few questions already. If y'all are ready to dive into questions, I don't have a lot, but I have a few ready for you.
Right.
So from Chris, we have, given that 80% of the watershed has burned due to the glass fire, should there not be more bank protection in order to be ready for rainfall, given climate change bringing large storm events, causing increased rate of flow, erosion, and debris flows up to 10 years after a fire? It's a long question, but.
Should there be more erosion control, more revegetation? The concept, just about all of the dam was taken out, kind of down to the bedrock. But there was quite a bit of sediment that the fisheries agency really wanted us to keep in the system. And they acknowledged that this first winter, the turbidity from that sediment will be so severe it could and is likely to kill some steelhead this winter. But for them, it was more important to keep the sediment in the system and in the creek so that it could replenish the sediment starved areas of the creek for the habitat. And in the long run, it actually is better for the steelhead to endure any damages that could happen this first winter. That in the long run, it'll actually be better for their populations in the future.
So our next question,
sorry, I might add, with the sediment, so the city removed extensive amount of sediment in early 2000s, 2007 area. And in that time frame between then and 2017, you could hardly walk down in the area above the dam. It had filled in with trees naturally. And that's the hope that this will happen again through regulatory agencies. San Clemente, they planted everything. It was very aggressive planting and it all washed out. So that's why there's this less approach.
So our next question is directly related to that sediment. Where did all of that sediment get put? 1,933 truckloads of sediment is not a small amount of sediment. So where did it go?
Well, the original plan was actually to have it all go to the Calistoga landfill. But the contractor was able to find some project sites in Napa County where there was a project that needed clean fill. And so actually a lot of the sediment went to these two fill sites. But a lot of the sediment that was suspected to maybe have trace amounts of asbestos all went to the Calistoga landfill.
And we have somebody asking for you to reiterate who the major funders were of the program, of the project.
Majority of the funds came from the City of St. Helena Water Enterprise and General Fund, but we had approximately 1.9 million split between the EPA, I believe that was a $900,000 grant, and the remaining coming from the Prop 84, I believe it was 840. I don't have my files anymore. I turned in my computer today, but it was heavily local funded, with the grant funding really pushing it over to the finish line.
The contractor's bid on the project was $3.4 million. It ended up being just a little bit under that.
And if I might add, the grant funds required a 50% match. So if you double that amount, that comes a local amount. But through the years, the construction came in far less than what it took over time studying this project.
And our fee for just the last the last year and a half of design, permitting, construction management was $1 million.
Yeah, this is definitely not a small project to be undertaken. Our next question is, why was nothing other than willow and buckeye plants planted? Could the area be highly vegetated to reduce slope failure and erosion? And you sort of answered this with your natural re-veg statement, but if you have anything to add to that.
The hydroseeding is native seeds, but it's really mostly grasses and poppies, things like that. There are actually, if we had planted any trees or shrubs, they would have required an irrigation system. And an irrigation system is plastic pipes running all up and down your project area. Actually, the permitting agencies were concerned that these would get washed into the creek during winter storms. The hydrology of the creek is such that in a storm, the flows can go from 1 to 100 CFS just overnight and then back down again. So the flows can get very high very quickly. And because this project is designed to naturally erode, there was a concern that all that piping would fall into the creek. So the permitting agencies are watching carefully to make sure that the riparian vegetation restores naturally. And if it doesn't, they're going to wait till the creek geomorphology is stable in the project area, and then possibly require the city to do all the planting of shrubs and trees that you're talking about. So it is in the plan, but it's a long-term plan to do that revegetation after the creek has stabilized. There was a really, all through our design and permitting process, the regulatory agencies were adamant about keeping out human-made devices and equipment and materials out of the project. We had to fight to just put those bolts in those trees that were made out of metal. Honestly, they take the natural preservation and the use of natural materials very seriously. And I guess they're used to projects being built and people walking away from them and having all this debris that can surface years later. So that's again why they're really taking a wait and see approach on things requiring the irrigation system.
So our next question is, are there any plans to stock the upper reaches with steelhead in the future?
No. The RCD, actually, it'd be nice if the fishery biologists from Napa RCD would be here to talk about their steelhead program. There is a steelhead like fish trap on the Napa River that they monitor during spawning season to track numbers. They also walk up and down the the creek, probably like at least 4 times a year, counting reds and looking for juvenile steelhead to keep track over time about the health of the steelhead. They have, they are naturally quite resilient and are expected to really thrive in the upper reaches now that this dam's out. So yeah, restocking is probably not needed here.
So next question is more education. Oh,
sorry. They also
tagged,
I believe they tagged the steelhead. So Napa RCD. So they actually, when they're trapping them every year during spawning season, they can track them as well. Sorry,
yes, we have a pit tagging program that's currently active. Yeah. So our next question is more education related, moving into the future. This whole process would be very instructive for school students. Is any effort being made by anybody to use this project as a model ecological project for local students?
Oh, that would be great. I would love to collaborate on something like that. We did also, as part of this project, create an area along the side of the road up there now where you can pull over, and we're in the process actually of creating one of those educational plaques that talks about the restoration and steelhead and the dam removal, and it's going to be right by this pullout. So people could come and look at it and learn a little bit of the science, but we would be more, I personally would be a big proponent of promoting science, be more than happy to take tours up here with students.
So we actually have our education staff on the call. He wanted us to mention that we do have a program talking about native fish. It's called our Salmon to Sanctuary program. And he says that he just finished working with 5 different high schools about the impacts of dams on our local fish populations. And students have submitted questions to Brian. Sorry, that was directed towards me, not to you. Sorry about that. So there is some education going on, and I'm sure that as we move forward in the future and we move forward in this restoration, we can use it as an example in some of our school programs that our education team runs. Let's see. So from Sherry Gardner, are there plans to keep invasive plants from colonizing the site? So basically, is invasive species monitoring a part of that 10-year post monitoring program?
Well, actually, so the contractor is actually still on the hook. There's a 1-year warranty where the contractor has to keep the project area, I think it's either 80 or 90% free of invasive species at a year after the conclusion of the project. So we will be releasing the last amount of money at the end of 2021 after checking to make sure invasive species have been controlled. So yes, that was a part of the project permits. And then long-term as well, the city does have to meet specific goals about that. It's going to be hard. There's like serious ivy and blackberries growing out there, and it's a lot of work to keep them out.
Yeah, blackberries are big. Every time any soil is disturbed and you're on the West Coast, you're going to have Himalayan blackberries coming in almost immediately. So that's always going to be a struggle to keep those at bay for sure. So I think that's all of our questions. We have a couple of notes that I'm going to take back to our education team, which is wonderful. But if anybody has any final questions, feel free to type them into the chat boxes now, and we can get those answered. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you. I mean, not just for this presentation tonight, but for the work that you've put in finally getting this you know, the immense amounts of paperwork basically and you know, surveying that it takes to get ready for, like you said, the, you know, 2 or 3 months of actual like digging things up and being in the field. So thank you for being, you know, spearheading this project and keeping it moving forward, and also for being with us here tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, we also hired a student group to make, the city hired a student group to make a mini documentary movie about the project. And so that'll hopefully be ready in about 4 to 6 months.
Nice. Be excited to share that with folks.
That could be an educational tool as well.
Yeah, we do have one more question that came in. If y'all have the time, we're 2 minutes over, but that's okay. If people are still interested, I'm not going to cut you off. Our question is, what effect will the runoff from the burned hillside have on the sediment deposited in the creek? And you sort of touched on this a little bit when you were talking about the glass fire.
Yeah, so the fire basically turns the soil into a hydrophobic surface. So a lot of the rain, what happened after the glass fire is the California agencies put together this multi-agency team called the Watershed Emergency Response Team. And they go into a burned watershed and create fairly quickly some maps for the local agencies on predicted fire impacts, potential erosion, and potential flooding impacts from the fire to help county agencies do fire response. One of the things that the report from this agency showed was that there's actually going to be much higher runoff because of the fire. So there's no vegetation, the soils have become hydrophobic. There should be increased turbidity, and we've definitely seen a lot of burnt, light floating branches mobilized. But so flows are going to be higher in the creek this winter. There should be, when it is raining, the runoff will be more turbid. But the report said there's probably not going to be like big debris flows or anything happening in the York Creek watershed, because it is a function of sort of steepness, soil type, you know, there are a lot of different factors that go into it. So in the York Creek area watershed, at least, we do expect increased turbidity and increased flows, but not a lot of extra like sediment and dirt per se, like coming through. Erica, do you have a comment on that?
No, yeah, no, I think you touched on everything, and there was a lot of eyes on this, and there's a lot of concern when we get every storm. For anyone that's local, is that, you know, every storm that we think we're going to get up to that 100 CFS, the county's talking to us, our regulatory agencies are talking to us. All eyes are on this area just to make sure that it's working as designed and theorized, since this is a little different approach than it used to be. And so far it's been performing well, if you can say that word. You know, we've been fortunate not to have the huge rains, though we still need the rain. But I think with this first year, letting that area fill in and the vegetation and the hydroseeding that was completed take effect is beneficial to this watershed and critical to the improvements that we see in the future years. It'll be interesting to see how this works. It's I really encourage you to go up there. It's a nice parking area. I had a post Zoom meeting with the Prop 84 board with the grant, and I highly encourage everyone, if you haven't done a Zoom meeting outside, it was probably the best thing up there above York Creek and hearing the trickling of the water, you know, going naturally downstream and flowing. It's just, beautiful. And there is poppy up there. That's part of the hydroseed mix, and that's going to be beautiful when those start to bloom.
Well, great. I think that's all we have, except there's a bunch of folks in here that, you know, have worked with both of you on this project and know about this project. And I just want to, all of them are just saying thank you, thank you, thank you for a wonderful presentation and for working on this project overall. So again, thanks so much. I do want to mention, since it is raining, I want to use this opportunity to plug our Stream Watch program. We are monitoring how our streams are affected by rain events here in Napa County. So if anybody is interested, we could always use your help after rain events to go out, and we have a set, I believe it's 27 different creeks throughout the Napa River watershed that we are monitoring to see how they react to rain events, when they start flowing, when they stop flowing, all of that. So if you're interested in doing any of that, you can go to napawatersheds.org/streamwatch. And I'll type that into the chat box as well. But this is the perfect time. I mean, it's raining, and we want to know what happens immediately after these rain events. So you don't have to adopt a site. You can just go once, you can go twice, you can go to every single site that you want. You can go to one site that's close to your house. You can kind of make it your own. So I just want to put in a little plug for the Stream Watch program. And with that, one more round of thank yous to our speakers and to everybody. Thanks for the audience for sticking with us. We're, 7 minutes over at this point. So thanks for sticking with us. And we will see you maybe in person, but probably virtually coming up in May for our next Wild Napa. So have a wonderful evening, everybody, and we will see you hopefully sometime in person soon.
Thanks again. Have a great night.
Thank you.